Have you ever looked back at your relationships and realized they all had something in common? Maybe they all ended in the same way. Maybe the people you loved had eerily similar traits. Maybe you always ended up feeling the same way, unseen, misunderstood, chasing love instead of receiving it freely. It's not a coincidence. It's not bad luck. And it's definitely not just about them. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology, had a name for this: the unconscious repetition of patterns. According to Jung, our outer relationships are often mirrors of our inner world. The people we fall for aren't random. They are chosen by the unconscious mind, drawn to us because they activate something deeply familiar within. It might feel like love at first sight, but often it's recognition. You don't love the person in front of you, you love what they awaken in you. Sometimes it's warmth, sometimes it's comfort, but sometimes it's pain, old pain, the kind you buried a long time ago. Let's go deeper. Jung believed that we each carry what he called a complex, a cluster of memories, emotions, and beliefs centered around a particular theme, usually formed in childhood. One of the most powerful complexes is the love complex. It's shaped by your earliest experiences of connection, affection, rejection, or abandonment. If you grew up in a home where love was conditional, unpredictable, or absent, your nervous system was trained to expect that as normal. So now as an adult, you might feel inexplicably drawn to people who are emotionally unavailable, or people who are unpredictable, or people you have to work for, not because you enjoy suffering, but because your unconscious mind is trying to recreate what it once knew. It thinks, this is love. This is how love feels. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is why you keep ending up in the same story with a different name. The faces change, the details shift, but the emotional core remains the same. You keep falling for the same type of person because you haven't yet uncovered why your psyche finds them so familiar. Let's consider a few examples. Imagine someone named Elif. Every person she dates starts off passionately. There's chemistry, intensity, a sense of being seen and desired. But within weeks or months, the person begins to pull away. They become distant, emotionally inconsistent, even cold. And Elif, rather than stepping away, doubles down. She texts more, she tries harder, she becomes anxious, preoccupied. It's not until months later, after yet another breakup, that she realizes this is the same story again. What's happening here is not just a string of bad matches. Elif is repeating a psychological pattern. She's unconsciously drawn to people who mirror her earliest experiences with love. Maybe a parent who was loving one moment and critical the next, or who made her feel she had to earn affection. Another example, a man named David only falls for partners who need saving. They're going through something, they're emotionally wounded, they need support. David feels needed, valuable, important, but over time he becomes resentful. He feels unappreciated, emotionally drained. The relationship collapses. And yet, a few months later, he finds himself in another relationship with someone else who just needs help. Why? Because David's unconscious identity is wrapped around being the savior. Perhaps as a child he had to emotionally support a parent, or take on too much responsibility too early. Now he only feels worthy in relationships where he is fixing someone. Jung would say these are not accidents, they are invitations. Your patterns are showing you where your wounds are. They're not punishments, they're not destiny, they're messages. So what do you do with this? First, you begin by noticing the pattern. Get curious. What emotional experience repeats in your relationships? Is it feeling not enough? Is it abandonment? Is it being controlled or being invisible? Second, ask, where did I first feel this? Don't judge it, just observe. Maybe your caregivers were well-meaning but emotionally distant. Maybe you felt overlooked or that love was something you had to earn. Maybe your family taught you that being selfless was the only way to be loved. These early emotional blueprints become the templates for your adult relationships. Third, break the fantasy. The people you are most intensely drawn to are often the ones who fit your pattern the best. That intensity isn't necessarily love, it's emotional activation. It's your unconscious mind saying, here's another chance to fix what once broke you. But you can't fix the past by repeating it. Jung emphasized the importance of integrating the shadow, the hidden, rejected, and repressed parts of ourselves. He believed that true growth requires us not to run from our darkness, but to face it directly. This is not a metaphorical idea, it's a profound psychological truth that many still avoid. Most people think they want love, they say they want healthy, secure relationships, but unconsciously, many are still chasing familiar pain, and that's where the shadow comes in. Your shadow is not just your anger or jealousy, it's also your wounds, your unmet needs, your unhealed stories about what love is supposed to feel like. So when you fall for someone who's emotionally unavailable, controlling, or hot and cold, it's not because you're foolish. It's because some part of you has internalized a narrative. This is what love feels like. You think you're choosing freely, but as Jung famously said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so you find yourself repeatedly drawn to the same kind of person, the one who keeps you guessing, the one who doesn't show up fully, the one who mirrors your wounds rather than your healing. At first, it might feel like chemistry, intensity, fire. But what's really happening is that your nervous system is recognizing something deeply familiar, something unresolved. Psychologists call this repetition compulsion, a term first introduced by Sigmund Freud. It's the idea that we unconsciously recreate situations that echo earlier emotional experiences in an attempt to resolve them. You're not just falling in love, you're trying to rewrite a story that was written when you were too young to understand it. Think of someone who grew up with a parent who was emotionally distant. As a child, they learned that affection came in small doses. Maybe they only got attention when they performed well, or when they stayed quiet. That child grows up and feels deeply drawn to partners who show affection inconsistently. Why? Because that inconsistency feels like home. It mirrors their original blueprint for love. This isn't dysfunction, it's survival. The brain is always trying to find coherence. And if inconsistency is all you've known, consistency can feel foreign, even threatening. So what happens when you begin the inner work? When you journal, reflect, seek therapy, sit in silence, or read the works of thinkers like Jung, you start to peel back the layers of your conditioned self. You begin to question your patterns. You start to see the people you're drawn to not as destiny but as data. You realize you've been chasing people who affirm your worst fears about yourself. That you're unlovable unless you prove your worth, that love must be earned, that if you're not enough, you will be left. And when you see that clearly, a crack forms in the cycle, a space opens where choice lives, because healing doesn't mean you'll never feel attracted to your old type again. Your brain is wired by repetition. The neural pathways formed in childhood don't vanish, but healing gives you a moment of pause, a breath between impulse and action, where you can ask yourself, is this love, or is this a reenactment? In that pause, everything changes. You no longer crave chaos. You begin to recognize that what once felt exciting was often just anxiety in disguise. You no longer see inconsistency as passion. You no longer confuse withdrawal for mystery. You begin to understand that peace isn't boring, it's safe. And safety is the soil where real love grows. Dr. Nicole LePera, author of How to Do the Work, puts it simply, our nervous system will seek the familiar, even if the familiar is painful. This is why awareness is crucial, Because once you bring the unconscious forward, you begin to choose differently. You start choosing people who don't trigger your abandonment wound, but who reflect your growth, your self-trust, your calm. You stop choosing based on the adrenaline rush of the chase and start choosing based on how you feel when you're with them. Grounded, seen, safe. This is hard, not because healthy love is complicated, but because your body might still be wired to expect pain. And if pain has been the price of love in your past, then love that comes without suffering might feel wrong. So, part of your work becomes retraining your nervous system. You learn to sit with stillness. You learn to recognize emotional safety as attractive. You begin to honor your needs instead of hiding them. And most importantly, you stop apologizing for your sensitivity, your depth, your desire to connect fully. As author Alain de Botton wrote, "We don't fall in love with those who make us happy. We fall in love with those who feel familiar." That familiarity isn't always safe, but now you are starting to choose differently, not because you're forcing yourself, but because your awareness is expanding. You're no longer seeking a partner to rescue you from your wounds. You're seeking one to walk beside you as you heal them yourself. This shift is subtle but revolutionary. You may still feel the pull toward your old type, but now you recognize it for what it is. A doorway to awareness, not a path to fulfillment. Jung spoke often about integration. His idea was not to eliminate the shadow, but to accept it, to understand it, to bring it into the light. He believed that every person we encounter, especially those who stir us most deeply, is a mirror, a reflection of what we love, what we fear, what we have denied in ourselves. So when you fall for someone who doesn't love you back, or who pulls away, or who makes you feel small, it's not just about them. It's about what they activate in you, what they mirror, what they awaken. And that awareness is not a punishment, it's a gift. Because when you realize what you're doing, when you stop looking only at what they did and begin turning inward, you open up a whole new level of emotional intelligence. You stop asking, why did they hurt me? And begin asking, why am I drawn to people who hurt me in the first place? It's not victim blaming, it's the opposite. It's reclaiming your power. You begin to understand that your pain didn't start with them. They just activated what was already buried. You stop trying to earn love, prove your worth, or convince someone to stay. Instead, you start embodying the truth that you are already worthy, already enough, already lovable. This shift is subtle at first, but it's seismic in its impact. You begin to take full responsibility, not for their behavior, not for their inability to meet you, but for your choices, for the ways you ignored red flags, for the moments you stayed too long, hoping your love would be enough to change them. You start to see how much of your energy went into trying to be chosen by someone who never really saw you. You stop blaming others for not giving you what you need, and instead you begin to give it to yourself. You become less reactive. You stop spiraling when someone pulls away. You don't make silence mean something about your worth. Instead, you get curious. You notice your triggers. You ask, what is this situation waking up in me? And in that awareness, you begin to respond instead of relapsing. Maybe for the first time you ask yourself, is this the kind of love I want to build my life around? Or is this just the kind of love I've learned to accept because I didn't know better? This is what Carl Jung called shadow integration. It's the moment when you stop living at the mercy of unconscious wounds and start making conscious choices, when you start choosing from your healing instead of your history. Your entire emotional landscape begins to shift. You no longer romanticize people who keep you waiting. You no longer chase those who treat you like an option. You stop being seduced by breadcrumbs. You stop confusing inconsistency with depth, because now you've stopped choosing love that feels like abandonment with a bow on top. Now you choose love that feels like home. And what does that even mean, love that feels like home? It doesn't mean comfort without growth or a life free of challenges. It means emotional safety. A space where your nervous system doesn't have to constantly scan for danger. A relationship where your presence is appreciated, your voice matters, and your needs are not met with criticism, but curiosity. And there's science behind this too. Neuroscience shows that the amygdala, the brain's fear center, is hyperactive in people who grew up with inconsistent caregivers. This means your brain is wired to look for signs of threat, even in safe situations. That's why emotional inconsistency can feel exciting. It activates the same neural pathways as gambling or addiction. You're not crazy, you're conditioned. In fact, dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for pleasure and reward, spikes not from consistent rewards, but from intermittent ones. That's why people who text you inconsistently or pull away and return again can feel more addictive than those who are steady. It's the same mechanism used by casinos. But just because your brain is wired that way doesn't mean you're doomed. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, means that with enough awareness and practice, you can build new pathways. You can learn to feel excitement in stability. You can teach your body that peace is not boring. That healthy love doesn't mean the absence of passion. It means the presence of emotional safety. And this is where evolutionary psychology adds another layer. From a survival standpoint, our ancestors were wired to seek out relationships that promised reproduction and protection. Traits like dominance, mystery, or high status were often attractive because they signaled power. But in modern relationships, those traits, when paired with emotional unavailability, often become toxic. We're no longer choosing partners for tribal survival. We're choosing them for emotional intimacy, but the old wiring remains. So how do we evolve emotionally? By becoming aware of the pattern. Carl Jung once said, "While we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life." That's exactly what happens in love. Every person you fall for, especially the ones who shake you to your core, are mirrors. They show you what's unhealed. They reflect the stories you still believe about love, worth, safety, and identity. And once you recognize this, you can begin the real work, not of trying to fix or change the other, but of shifting your internal landscape. You learn that real love doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself. You start to ask better questions. What am I seeking in this person that I haven't yet found in myself? Or what would it look like to stop abandoning myself in the name of being loved? And you stop forcing love. You stop performing. You stop auditioning for affection. You realize that the people who are meant to stay won't require you to shrink. Instead of begging to be seen, you start seeing yourself. Instead of chasing people who confuse you, you wait for people who understand you. Instead of falling into old patterns, you pause, reflect, and pivot. This is conscious love, not love that is perfect, but love that is intentional. Love that doesn't rely on fantasy, but on truth. Because when you love consciously, you're no longer seduced by someone's potential. You look at who they are now. You ask, do they respect my boundaries? Do they communicate with care? Can they hold space for my emotional world? If the answer is no, you let go, not with bitterness, but with clarity. And the clarity comes from knowing, I am not here to relive my trauma. I am here to transform it. It's important to know that this shift doesn't happen all at once. Some days you'll still feel the pull toward the unavailable person. You'll still feel the ache, the hope, the fantasy. That's okay. That's part of the work. Healing isn't linear. It's a spiral. You revisit the same pain again and again, but from higher ground. You see more, you understand more, and slowly the pain loses its grip. You no longer confuse longing with love. You no longer settle for connection that requires you to disconnect from yourself. You no longer view rejection as proof that you're unworthy. You see it as redirection, a sign that something more aligned is waiting. And this alignment begins not with them, but with you. Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming whole, is the goal of the human psyche. And love is one of the most powerful forces that can guide or derail this journey. But if you use love as a mirror instead of a crutch, as a path to growth rather than validation, it becomes sacred. So yes, you may fall for the same type of person over and over, but now you understand why. You see the pattern, you name it, you honor it, but you do not let it define your future. You become the observer of your own behavior, not its prisoner. You are no longer acting out old scripts, you're rewriting them. Not with fantasy, not with force, but with truth. With the quiet, grounded, fiercely honest truth of who you are when you no longer need to be saved, just met. And that is the love you are now learning to choose, not the love that wounds you, but the love that welcomes you fully, freely, finally.